time for the second installment of the halfway mark check-in. In today's discussion, we'll be going back to some more award frontrunners. This time, it'll be centered around my MVP for each position. Think of it as the Role Star Awards that players got at the end of Season 2. It's basically the same concept, except I'm only handing out one per position. Keep in mind that these players are all picked based on value, by the way. It does not, I repeat, does not necessarily mean they are the number one player at their position. Like in my video from the other day, I will be basing my decisions based off things like personal judgment, statistics, achievements, records, and anything else that I think is necessary to bring up. All stats used in this video come from the Stats Lab on the Overwatch League website, by the way. Oh, and feel free to continue the discussion down in the comment section. I'd love to hear who makes your list for this type of thing. Now, typically I like to start these videos off with the tanks, but let's change it up. Let's give the supports love first. How about we start it off with the main support position? If you want my honest opinion, there are 3 realistic options that you can go with. The guys I have in contention are Funny Astro, Moth, and Lee Jae-gun. Those 3 have stood above the rest of the pack, and for good reason. Each of them have been the model of consistency. They are extremely dependable. Funny Astro has the smarts and aggression, Moth has the clutch factor, and Lee Jae-gun is a bloodthirsty machine. All of their unique styles help push their respective teams above and beyond, but I can only select one. My current MVP at the main support position is Moth. Early on in the season, everybody called him a Lucio one-trick, and I never quite understood why. The Shock had one bad week when Lucio happened to be banned, and now suddenly Moth isn't that good anymore. I've never gotten it. His performances have met expectations without a problem to me. In fact, I would go as far as saying he's one of the best players on the Shock this year. Moth has and always will be this team's rock. It's the same old story. He does his job quietly, but isn't afraid to take charge on his own if the Shock need that extra push. And he flexes too. Forget Lucio, he can play your Brig, Bap, Zen, whatever you need, he's got you covered. He might not be as flashy as your FD gods and Lee Jae-guns of the world, but he still does do his part to make contributions in-game at the main support position. He currently leads the league in environmental kills, and many of those environmental kills have come in the clutch. Some people don't understand how big this guy comes up when the Shock have their backs against the wall. 2 of the big hard carry performances I remember were against Toronto and Dallas, but I'm sure there's a few others I'm forgetting about. My point is you can really feel how much his team needs him to be successful, and that's why I think Moth is a better choice than the others I mentioned. The other 2 have been putting up incredible performances, but they don't feel as needed compared to Moth. I will say though, Astro has made a major difference on the Fusion compared to when Neptuno was there, but how much of it is only because of him? He's playing next to Alarm after all, who has also made quite the difference. With Moth, it feels different to me compared to the other guys. Don't let the team he plays for blind you here. Even if the common consensus is that Moth is not the number 1 main support, he's certainly been the most valuable. Alrighty, let's transition over to flex support. No suspense here. The clear frontrunner as of right now is Alarm. I really did try and make a case for a few others, but it was no use. Alarm has been having the rookie season of a lifetime. He's right up there with some of the best players in the league in terms of impact. In the video I made on Tuesday, I listed some of his feats. If you missed it or are watching me for the first time, here's a reminder. So for starters, Alarm is the leader in total healing in Season 3. Not only that, but if you combine his per 10 averages on Ana, Baptiste, Zenyatta, and Moira, he's consistently near the top for all damage categories. The one gripe you could have with him is that he's only top 12 in healing when using those same combined stats, but a lot of those guys that are above him aren't at the level of Alarm. You aren't going to take somebody like Crimzo or AimGod over him, now are you? And since they're on worse teams, they have to worry about healing up their team a lot more anyway. The only guys that I think have been comparable to Alarm this year are Jonak, Izayaki, and Violet. In a lot of places damage-wise, you'll see Jonak or Violet rank higher than Alarm. Jonak tends to be better on Zen and Ana in those particular stats, but is that really much of a surprise? That's Jonak's style of playing support. He likes to do the damage. We've known that for 3 years now. It's who he is. However, being a bloodthirsty support is not what it's all about. Healing is your main priority, obviously, and Alarm hasn't beat out on everything they play besides Zen. But some of you may be asking, what's the deal with Violet then? He hasn't beat on both damage and healing with those stats. While that may be true, Violet has a less complete game. Violet has mostly been playing Moira, Ana, and Baptiste this year, and I will admit, his Moira and Bap are probably both the best in the league, but his Ana makes him very vulnerable. His healing is noticeably worse than that of Alarm's, and he dies a whopping 6 times per 10 minutes, which is a league high among those with at least 2 hours of playtime with Ana. He dies nearly double compared to Alarm. So while Violet has been unbelievable in some cases, he lacks the overall flexibility and reliability that you see out of Alarm. He is the perfect balance. The damage, the positioning, the heals, the versatility. It allows for him to edge out some of the other deadly flex supports we have in the Overwatch League. Now it's time for DPS. When making this video, I was forced to make a decision. Do I select somebody who is considered a hit skin and one who is a flex, or do I pick 2 DPS in general? I decided to go with the latter of the two because DPS is such a broad position, and people's opinions on what someone counts as will vary greatly. Looking at DPS in general will make the process a lot easier, but for those of you who really want me to pick one of each, I'll make an honorable mention at flex DPS. My MVP for flex DPS would be Fleta if I had to choose somebody. He's been a man possessed, an absolute freak of nature if you will, and on many different heroes. Everything he touches looks top tier. Need a good echo? Fleta's got you covered. Need him on Mei? Need him on Tracer? He plays it all. Fleta once again is the meta, and this time he's taking the league by storm. He appears to be at the top of his game. I haven't seen him look this confident since the early days of Season 1. He's a changed man, and I for one think he's without a doubt the best flex DPS in the Overwatch League. With honorable mentions aside though, let's get the more obvious pick out of the way first. One of my 2 role stars on DPS is Carpe. I mean, how could I not put him on here? He's literally my front runner to win MVP. This is literally Season 1 Carpe on repeat. All that pent-up frustration of being stuck on goats is being unleashed on all who oppose him. Season 3 might as well be called the Wrath of Carpe because that's what it looks like. To quickly reference some stats from the other day again, Carpe leads the league in total final blows by a substantial margin, and he finds himself in second place for both eliminations and hero damage. He gets unreal production every time he steps foot on stage. I have no idea how he does it. His totals more than make up for him being behind with certain averages. He is the king of cleaning up the mess. Every fight feels like it's him finishing everybody off, but he can do it himself too. That's the beauty of Carpe's style. He can take a very team-oriented role, or he can pick off a few enemies all by himself. It doesn't matter because either way he will put in the work. I honestly do feel like I'm in the past. Carpe is doing whatever he wants again. This Fusion team is amazing. There's no doubt about it. But without Carpe, there is no way they get to where they are right now, nor do they have as good of a chance of coming out on top in closely contested games. And I don't think I have to remind anybody that the Fusion go to map 5 a lot. I mean, this year alone, they've already gone to 5, I believe. When your team wins about 60% of the team fights you're involved in, it's safe to say you have a pretty overwhelming presence on fight outcomes. Speaking of being dependent on so much, that brings me into my second selection at DPS. All last video, I was teasing you Dallas fans with honorable mentions, but that ends now. My other DPS MVP is Decay. What he's been doing is similar to Carpe, and in some ways, he's more valuable. I mean, from the pure aspect of lifting a team, Decay has been the undeniable #1 hard carry of Season 3. Remember how I said Carpe is at the top for total damage and final blows? Well, Decay ranks 3rd in both of those. This guy's back must be on the verge of shattering. Dallas doesn't even have a great record either. 4-6 is nothing to write home about. But you put somebody else in there and see what happens. That loss total would definitely be higher. And I have my doubts on how hard they push the likes of San Francisco, Philly, or even the Valiant for that matter. Now I won't lie. Usually I defer to teams with great records when looking for standout players at this level, but with Decay I need to make an exception. I dare say that this Dallas team is practically nothing without him this year. He's been outputting some once-in-a-lifetime performances, with the most recent example coming in the May Melee against the Houston Outlaws. He's become a true superstar on the hit scan role. His McCree, Widow, and Ashe have been unreal, and don't even get me started on his Tracer. It's not a bold claim if you believe he's the best Tracer in the league. The case can certainly be made, and for good reason. Decay currently has the highest damage rate per 10 minutes on her in the league, all while boasting the second lowest death rate. And if you were wondering, you can find him outputting top damage stats on McCree as well. Take what I said about Carpe always having a presence, but put it on steroids with Decay. Looking at what he's done for Dallas, plus how he stacks up against the rest of the league, he deserves 100% to be in consideration for potential role stars at the DPS position. Transitioning over to off-tank, I find myself in quite the predicament. There's 2 guys I really want to pick. I'm torn between Choyobin and Void. it's really, really bad. It's what I'd imagine picking between children feels like. When you appreciate both people equally, who on earth do you go with? They both pass with flying colors when it comes to team success, statistics, and the eye test. They both do exactly what I want out of my off-tank players. I am so tempted to leave it at a tie and move on, but that would be no fun, now would it? Making me suffer makes for better content after all. So while Choi has the better overall averages on the likes of D.Va and Sigma, I'm going to hand out my mid-season off-tank MVP to Void. Choi can't quite stack up to Void's contributions. I don't think I've ever seen an off-tank player be so involved in my entire life. I say this jokingly, of course, but if you go by totals, Void is technically the best DPS on his team and one of the bloodthirstiest players in the league. He's number 1 in eliminations by a noticeable amount. Being top 4 in damage and top 8 in final blows is pretty insane as well. This guy is all over the place. How he manages to be this involved while protecting his teammates is something that doesn't even feel right. And you want to know what makes the whole situation even scarier? He's only died 249 times this year. Less than 3 deaths per 10 minutes come on D.Va, by the way. Meanwhile, Choi has died 2 less times total, but he also happens to have played over 3 hours less than Void. That's ridiculous. How is that even possible? I am convinced that Void isn't even human. He's having one of the greatest seasons by an off-tank ever. That is dominance at its finest. Oh, and if you want one other small reason why you may want to consider Void over Choi, it would be overall flexibility. Void is the much better Zarya player right now. You don't even need to look at the stats to come to that conclusion. I love Choi Yobin. He was my MVP prediction at the beginning of this year, but Void has done so much. In all honesty though, Choi might actually be the better player. When it comes to who's more valuable though, Void takes it. Those statistics are eye-opening. I've never seen anything like it out of a tank before. It's historically godlike. That's why if I only had one MVP to give out for this role, I'd have to go with Void right now. And last, but certainly not least, is main tank. And to be honest, this one was just as hard as off tank for me. 3 guys have stood head and shoulders above the pack for me. Mono, Fearless, and Sato are my current leaders that I made my selection from. They're all pretty similar statistically, so I want to keep my decision making more towards what I've seen watching them play-wise. The thing I've loved about Sato is the space he's creating while limiting the deaths to a minimum. It's like he's a completely different player if I'm going to be honest. Then with Mono, he continues to be that pillar of stability that has been there since the beginning of the NYXL's existence. He's the model of what it means to be consistent. But this year in particular, the NYXL have looked towards him quite a bit. He's carried them time after time, all while dealing with the pressure of changing up his style. It's a remarkable feat that goes to show you just how amazing this guy truly is. And finally with Fearless, he's the guy the Dragons depend on to win, it would seem. Through his godlike Winston play, the Dragons always seem to come out on top in the big games. The May Melee tournament is evidence of this. The Dragons go down 3-0 against Seoul, but then sub in Fearless and make the comeback. He's been the invaluable leader this team desperately needs in any sort of high pressure scenario. Okay, you get the point though, blah blah blah, they've all been good, but who is the most valuable? Well, right away, I'm going to eliminate Sato from the mix. The fusion depends so much more on Carpe and Alarm in my opinion. He's done a great job, don't get me wrong, but his value doesn't really match the other two in my opinion. So now it's between Fearless and Mono, and if I'm going to be honest, I still do have a few question marks about Fearless. He's pretty much been the best Winston player in the league, but that's it. He doesn't even have an hour of playtime on Rein or Orisa. Stand 1 tends to be their guy in any sort of non-Winston meta. We've seen Fearless find success on the Reinhardt and the Orisa in the little time he's played them, but the sample size is a little small. If anything, it goes to show there are some situations where he can't be depended on. Fearless has been unbelievable, but I'm picking Mono as my mid-season MVP on tank. His Orisa could use some work, but everywhere else, he's been great. He's comparable to Fearless on the Winston, and his Reinhardt looks like it might be better. Like I said earlier, Mono has been relied on more than ever this year, and he's stepped it up. Unlike past years, he's been having to make more and more of the plays on his own. There have been times throughout Season 3 where New York has not looked all that sharp. But even so, Mono is always doing everything within his power to snatch his team away from the clutches of defeat. The recent game against Chengdu is a great example. There were numerous occasions where it seriously looked like New York were going to lose that game. But you know who came to the rescue when they nearly got full held on Watchpoint Gibraltar when all hope seemed lost? Mono. That's who. He kept the hope alive with a crazy Winston carry, and that's just one example, you know? There's plenty of other ones out there throughout the season you could go back and look at. Mono has done it all. This season has not been easy for him. It's been quite the transition, but even so, he still finds a way to shine brightly. Well, that pretty much does it. Those are my 6 current role stars. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to leave a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Don't forget that you can also follow me on Twitter at ATP Overwatch, join the community Discord server through the link in the description, and become a channel member if you wish to further support me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.